Hi, Vincent Hall, and welcome to another episode of Anyone Can Draw, Paint, and Create. I hope everyone had a nice Thanksgiving holiday, and now that we're into December, I was thinking about last December, and around this time I took a trip to Chicago to visit my youngest daughter. While we were there, we went to the Art Museum at the Art Institute of Chicago to see the Andy Warhol exhibit. Now, Andy Warhol's style may not be your cup of tea, but he did bring something to the art world that we can explore in our drawing classes or painting. One of the ideas is how to look at something with different colors, the same object rather, with different colors, different styles, and play around with what we call gridding. So we're going to create a 4-panel, like a window pane, on a piece of paper, and then pick a simple object and try to explore different ways to represent that object in each square separately. But by placing tape down, like we've done before, to create mini versions of a finished piece of work, almost like a mat, we're going to be able to then have one finished drawing, even though there are 4 little small drawings within them. The other beauty of this is it gives you a chance to play around and experiment with how you want to look at an object and what your particular style might be. Maybe your favorite medium or materials, or just basically how you look at this object. That way, if you really like one of them, you can always cut it out and use it as a small piece of art in a frame. I think there's something beautiful and charming about small works of art, and there are whole exhibits dedicated to small pieces. So don't be afraid to go small. Thinking of small, and thinking of the holiday season that's upon us, I decided I'm going to work with a holly branch. I just went out and clipped this from one of my trees in the backyard. And I'm going to use this to show you, how to draw holly leaves in case you want to do something a little more festive for the holidays. And also how we're going to be turning it around and creating 4 individual drawings. The first thing we want to do is take our paper and divide it into 4 equal parts. And because I also want to have a bit of a frame around it, I'm just using the width of my ruler rather than struggle measuring everything out, but using this as a good guideline of where to keep things straight and where to not go. And I'm going to use tape then to further emphasize this. I just want to make sure I'm straight here with this, right about there. Looks good. So whatever you might have that you can use, if you don't have a ruler, the edge of a book works. So, don't be too worried about that. Now, you don't have to do what I'm going to do, and I'm going to erase this out because I think I am going to want to keep these as individual elements. We're going to take tape, and this is just plain old masking tape. It's not super sticky, and I'm going to just line this up. And again, this is optional, but I thought this would be fun so that when we take it off, we have a nice clean edge of the drawing. I'm going to turn it this way in case I want to go over the lines, because, and maybe you want to keep it more organic and a rough line, and that's fine too. You sure don't have to do it this way. It's just an option. So, but I'm trying to stay as true to Andy Warhol as I can. So that's why I'm doing it this way. All right, good enough. And those edges are make it easier to peel off. Now it's time to get started looking at our holly leaf. I'm going to start by just planning out where I want each one to go. Now, since we're doing 4, we could go this way or this way. So you can do portrait or landscape. I'm going to do landscape simply because it fits better in the camera that you're looking at. And I would like my leaves to kind of come in a little bit. So I wouldn't want them going all the way out on the upper side because that leads your eye away. And compositionally, we want people to look in the middle. So I'm just going to hold this away a little bit so I can look at it. And I'm looking down towards the center. So to draw holly leaves, the first thing I would do is plot where my stem is. And then with the leaves, you can do one of 2 things. You can draw them with their little spikes, which I just experienced outside, and that was not pleasant. Or you can start by looking at what their shape represents, and they're really an oval. So I'm going to draw my oval. And I see another one here, and as they come towards me, I'm making them bigger. These are all very uniform in size. But when you're drawing, you're trying to make a 3-dimensional object on a 2-dimensional surface. we have to make things coming towards us look bigger, because that's how foreshortening works in order to represent something. And here's my 2 little holly berries. They're the only 2 I see here. I'll do another view where I can see more of them. And then I see more leaves back in here. There's this leaf here, and then there's another leaf going back here, and then a big one here. So I'm going to go right over the stem, and then I'm going to later on clean up that line. So once we have our ovals in, you can go back with your pencil and just follow along your edge and create your little points. Now, you don't have to do holly leaves. I just thought this would be fun for the holidays, but feel free to pick whatever object you like. Heck, Andy Warhol did a soup can. So that's always a possibility. Something simple lying around the house that you just might want to look at in a bunch of different ways. And I'll come back and add the rest of these little spikes later, but you can see the idea that I'm starting to get spikes in my holly leaf here, and I will erase this little line out so that it makes more sense. I like to just get everything roughed in before I go and finish off the different drawings. So I'm going to move to a different view here. This one, I can set this, I'll set it on the tape, so the tape is going to hold my holly up for me. I am looking front on, which is a little more of a challenge, but it's a good challenge to have. And I am going to, again, this one, the holly leaves are, or excuse me, the holly berries are the dominant element in here. So I'm blocking my holly berries in first, and they're pretty clumped together near the stem. Then I added an extra degree of hard to myself by trying to draw this leaf on an angle. So it's really swooping down and around here as it comes out. So by drawing this vein in, the middle vein, you're able to help plot where these leaves are going. And again, I'll go back in and add the spikes later. This leaf comes up over that one holly berry. And then there's a little leaf back here in the background. Another one here. There's a big one back here that's behind everything. Going at this angle is giving me a lot of rich fullness to these holly leaves. And there's another one behind this. This one is going to get a little fixing right now, because sometimes when you draw it out the first way, you don't see things exactly as they are. So there we are. Once I get the spikes in, this leaf will make a much better view of what's going on. And there's also a third little leaf just hiding up back here. And again, when we start coloring things or shading them, they'll start to look different. Now what do I do for my fourth one? Warhol, by the way, just a side note, did the same object the same way and changed the color. So we're kind of doing a modified Warhol-like expression. So on this one, I am going to do one leaf and a holly berry, because I'm going to just do a different view. So I'm going to make this one leaf really huge, going off the page. Well, I think we'll do 3, because I like odd numbers, but 1 was just a little lonely down here. And I'm looking at this one, going off the page. And then I see 2 berries. There's one here, and there's one down in here that's implied. I'm drawing in the little stem, or I'm sorry, the stem and then the vein of the leaf too, so you can kind of see that. And then for our last one, I think I'll try the back view, because that's the view we did not look at all. And that has more of the stick, or stem, as you might want to call it, from the branch of the holly tree. And I'm drawing, I have to move my hand, so I hope you can see it, the little leaves that I'm seeing here. And since this is the back view, I'm not going to get that pretty rich green if I decide to go in with colored pencil, but maybe I'll keep this one in graphite. And then as the branch comes back, I see another holly leaf here. And then there's one that's curling up here. So if I run out of room, which I'm going to, I can show you what it would look like. I'm drawing on the tape because that'll come off and we won't see it. But if it helps you to get proportion to draw up and over the tape, then go ahead and do it if you're doing tape. If you're not doing tape, I might recommend just ending it wherever you want to end it, but at least that way you can see where you're going. And then there's another leaf hanging down here and another one kind of behind here. So this is a really different look here. And I think this is the one I'm going to keep all graphite because it's more interesting as shadows and highlights than color. Time to get started with our grids. Before we get started with the grid, I thought we should look at some of Andy Warhol's pieces. I think everyone's a little familiar with the iconic Marilyn Monroe, and that's coming up next. But here are the cats that he did, Tiger to be specific. And part of what Warhol wanted to do was use color to change the whole dynamic of what things look like. And you can see it's almost like the psychology of color and how these different tones play off of each other. These are also very similar, like this blue, this green. Then we have the orange and the pink. And most people find orange and pink very garish, but it works for Warhol. Here's the iconic Marilyn Monroe. And again, you can see it's the exact same image. These are silkscreen prints, but he used different colors and she looks different in each one. In this one, her teeth are red, or pink rather, and it almost looks like a closed mouth, but in reality it's not. The hands, very simple hand prints. He was big on mono printing and silkscreen printing. This one is interesting because at least it's two different views. It's a view of the artist as himself as a younger man. And you can see he had two drawings going this way, or excuse me, prints, but he did a drawing first. I did see the drawings for this. And then two of the opposite, but they're really just two different images, and he used them 4 times. I always loved cows, so I found the cows interesting. Now, if you found a picture of an animal, and I know there's people out there that love to draw animals, you can do 4 different views of one animal. I mean, this could be a cow looking at us, a cow looking sideways, a cow looking the other direction, whatever you might want to do. The idea is to just keep this nice clean grid and maybe change things up. Nothing simpler than a strawberry shape, and these are all a little bit different. You can see how the seeds are handled differently too. Then we have this one of David Bowie, pop star of the 80s, 90s. And it's the same image, of course, but he used silkscreen to get the different colors. What I like about this is the different tonal backgrounds. These two are the same, these two are not. But these two are almost complementary. And I think using complementary colors for your backgrounds could work if we decide to go the route of filling in a background. And then lastly, this one, this is done by students. I've just found it on the internet, so it's a little bit blurry, but they're all different views of themselves, focusing their eye like an Andy Warhol eye and then putting different things around them. But this was the one I could find that had different drawings all together. So I hope that gives you some ideas on where you can go with a Warhol-inspired drawing. Now that you had a chance to see how Andy Warhol handled some different backgrounds, let's get started with our own. Like I promised, I'm going to use this drawing as graphite. So I'm just selecting a couple different pencils and putting my holly leaf back about where it was for the picture, although I was holding it. So I'm just going to try to prop it up using my tape again and start by looking at the stem. And I'm using a very hard pencil. This one is a 9H. You really can't get much harder than that. And I'm just lightly going in because I also want to create the texture lightly of the stem of the holly leaves here and give the idea of wood texture. And this one connects further up. So that's probably all I'm going to do with my 9H. Then I'm just going to go take something a little softer, regular H, and color over this. And you won't see it till I hold it up, but it's creating a nice texture, almost like that sgraffito type texture we were talking about before where the lines fill in. And I'm going to use this pencil to draw in my little spikes and start to shade in my holly leaf. So I'm going around, and to do this in graphite, I'm going to lay in the tone going one direction along the inside vein of this leaf. And then I'm going to go the opposite direction on this side because this is the back end of the leaf. So I'm trying to show that lower, not shiny texture, but also to show the directionality of my lines. I'm going to leave those lines in. I'm not blending this one because I do want it to look like a different style. We're trying to go for two different styles. So same thing here. I'll draw in that little seam first there in the middle. Then I'm taking my edges, and on this side, I'm going to angle going towards the top. And on this side, I'm just angling going the opposite direction. Just to hopefully give this a sense of what is going on background. Now, if you want to bring in some more of those the spikes on the leaves, you can always erase out edges and then add some of those. Like right here, I think I got a little dark. So I'm just using my eraser to go lighter and drawing in a few of those spikes. Now, if something's going straight down, I have lots of choices. I'm going to angle my lines on this one going down, and on this one, this side. So I'm kind of treating that vein on the inside of the holly leaf like a directional assist and deciding which way I want to go with this based on where that vein is. And this one going this way. So we're just roughing these in, adding a few of the points along the way. We can clean this up with the eraser later. Things like this that are in the back, I'm going to skip with this pencil because they're very dark. So I don't want to overdo it. I'm just going to keep the ones where the light is hitting and go this direction here. There we go. I hope you can see over my left-handed hook. That's always a challenge. Any of you that are left-handed, you know what I'm talking about. And I'm just gonna erase here, add a few of the little spikes that I see. And so again, if you go up over the tape, that's fine because we're going to take that off later anyway. Now these two are going to be darker, as are the berries. So let me just get a little more of the branch in here. And I'm going to make it a little wider. Notice if I'm touching an area or going to the edge of my format, which is this little rectangle, I'm going off the format on the opposite edge. It's good to have things, if they're going to touch in one spot, touch in another. Or in the case of this one up here, not really touching at all. It can be floating, AKA Andy Warhol style, but for this one, we're not. Now, I'm going to look for my darker pencil. Here's a 2B. Pencils are jumping out. So the 2B is going to be a much softer, darker lead, and I'm just going to fill in where I see the shadows of these berries. So I'm leaving some of the areas highlighted, but I'm just going in darker. And then these darker leaves, see, by switching up my lead. So if you just have two different numbered pencils, that is even fine. But to give some depth, I'm going to use it. Now I'm going to leave little bits of that vein stay white so that I can see the difference. Because if I shaded it all in, we'd never see it. And I want to get some nice shadows. The beauty of the darker one is I don't need my eraser to go back in and add these little holly spikes. I can just go ahead in and shade them in. I'm not as concerned on this one with directional line like these because I'm just trying to get the sense of shadows and something behind something else. Go a little closer because I'm going to have that little vein just be ever so slightly lighter, not too terribly light. There we have some depth. And now if I want to, I can go back in. This one is a little darker on one side and start adding some shading. Again, I'm not going to use the blender. I'm keeping this kind of loose, but I want to show the back end of the leaves, so I'm not trying to get things looking real shiny or bright or even perfect. This is almost a gestural kind of drawing, but I do see some shadows, and I want to make sure this one is a shadow this way, that where I see the shadows, I'm adding them just so this looks a little more finished when we take off the tape. And then this one back here is actually pretty dark. So I'm just gonna, not as dark as the one behind it, mind you, but dark enough. And then go back in and just kind of look around and see where you might want to add some shadows or not. And I might even want to add some on one side of the branch. So if I'm picking a light source, for me, the light's coming from the right. So my left side of this is going to be darker. So I'll darken this side a little bit more, darken this side a little bit more. And I think we're pretty good on that one. So just so you can see a close up, here's my first drawing of the holly, just using 2 different pencils. Time to move on to some others. I was thinking, what would I like to do? And since Warhol did a lot of opposites going from this to this, and this is white background but shaded in with a lot of dark graphite, I thought for this one, I'm going to shade in the background, and you'll see what we'll do with the leaves. I'm not going to leave them just white outline, but they're going to be more minimal. So it's almost like a negative image or a reverse, where the negative space, also known as the background, in this case, is shaded in and treated more definitively than the object, which is an unusual way of drawing and something you might want to try because, again, it goes against the grain of what you've probably been used to in drawing or painting. If you're a painter, and I've been talking to a lot of painters in the art center, there seems to be a challenge sometimes in seeing the shapes. And that's common because, again, our left brain is constantly telling us what they are, not shapes. These are holly leaves. These are mountains. They're whatever it is that you're drawing or painting. So by filling in the shadows or the negative space, it helps you see what you did draw or paint, and if it's correct or needs correcting, it's a good exercise to try. I believe it was Rembrandt that said the shadows tell the story of any artwork, and I really go with that because everything as it emerges from the shadows, you get a sense of depth, you get a sense of what's there, and the shadows help you fill it in. So I used a very soft pencil. This is a 9B. If you have something called an ebony pencil at home, you can use that. Or a regular pencil, and then you could use your Q-tip or the blender, but I'm just gonna leave this like this for now. Now, if I just leave this white, it's probably just going to look a little unfinished, too unfinished. So what I'm going to do now is take my really soft lead pencil, or just press hard if you have a regular pencil, and I'm going to do what we called modified contour. So everywhere the things indent or come toward the center, I'm going to go darker, then I'm going lighter, then I'm going darker and lighter, and I'm getting some of those little spikes in that I missed. And then the same thing with the vein. I'm going to go lighter, then darker. You can see by doing this modified contour how quickly a plain old pencil line can suddenly have some real interest. So lighter where things go up, darker where they come down, lighter there, darker here, darker in here. And then the same with the vein, lighter, then darker. What this does is give your drawing some energy. And just pressing lighter and darker. And it's really going to start light, dark, start to get a whole new dimension to the piece. And I'm looking at each vein here, so where it's catching the light, I'm going lighter, and where it's not, I'm going darker, and that's why you see the little lines fading away. Now, some of these are getting a little dark in here, but that's okay. And we just keep going. And I'm going to get to these little holly berries here in a minute, but I hope you get the idea. So here it goes in, darker, out lighter, and then darker as it comes to the center, and then darker as it comes in. These are one of my favorite kind of drawing, modified contour, because they really help. And if you don't do anything else with a drawing, then just change how hard you press with the pencil, you'll get a whole nice new way of looking at your work. Now this is that weird crazy leaf that was coming out at a strange angle. So hopefully when we get everything else in, it'll make a little more sense. But this one was bending and wrapping around, so that's always fun. And then this one, the vein sort of goes in. Now, here we are with the berries. I'm going to do the same thing with the holly berries that I just did with this leaf. I'm going to go around one side darker than the other. And like I said, my light's coming on my table from the right, so the left sides of things are darker, or the bottom side. So there's one more berry in here I didn't see. And I'm not going to fill them in, which might seem counterintuitive, but when does a line drawing not become a line drawing and become a value drawing? It's all up for grabs, because I'm making these lines much thicker than I made the leaf lines, but I'm still keeping it line. I'm not filling them in completely. And then you can just go back in, again, my handy trusty eraser. Make sure I have this leaf coming over this one. There we go. And here we have our modified contour drawing of looking straight on at the holly leaves. Yes, there's no shadows, and this might not be your cup of tea, but these modified contour drawings are a lot of fun. Okay, for the next two, I think I'm going to switch to colored pencil, just so in case you're up for colored pencil, we'll try it. What you might want to do if you're going to use colored pencil is limit the palette, or in other words, just pick a few. So since this holly leaf is red and green, I picked a light, a medium, and a dark green, and a light, a medium, and a dark red. And I'm going to use one of the reddish browns for the stem if I see it. What I've decided to do is have this one and this one be completely opposite. So the colors I use for one are going to be opposite on the other, which is going to look really weird because we'll have red leaves with green holly berries. But that's the whole idea of experimenting, trying something different. It doesn't always have to just look exactly like the object. Let's see what we can do. Okay, I'm going to start up here. And on this one, I'm going to do the traditional, exactly how it looks drawing. Get these pencils out of the way. And I'm going to start by just roughing in this whole area with colored pencil. Now, it's already drawn in pencil, so I can either use that to my advantage or I can just erase it out. But I'm going to leave it because I do like sometimes graphite and colored pencil together. It can look kind of nice. And I'm just going to basically, almost coloring book style, lay in a tone on all of these leaves, the same tone. The shading is going to come later. And again, at this point, since I'm just trying to lay in a tone, I'm not even worried about looking at the object yet. That's going to come in a minute, but we want to get this thing completely drawn in first. Oh, there's another leaf hiding out back here. All right. Okay, so we have roughed in the area that we're going to have as greens. Now, for the sake of time, I'm just going to look at one leaf and start with this one so you can see how to do this. I don't think everyone's doing holly leaves, so I'll just show you how I would finish off one, and then we'll come back and see the finished product on this one, because I do want to move to this and show you the opposites. Alrighty, on this leaf, let me move my holly leaf a little bit. There we go. I'm going to use my green pencil, the light green one, to give me a sense of where those holly spikes are on this particular leaf. There's one more there. And just kind of darken in around these a little bit. There we go. Now I'm going to switch to my darker colors because a lot of this holly leaf has dark colors and they're very rich this time of year. I have two different greens that are dark. I have this green, which is a little warmer, kind of more like a forest green or a sap green if you were painting. And again, I'm just coloring in the entire picture with this where I see the shadows. So I'm going over most of that lighter green, just not here and there. And then I'm switching to this really deep green. So if you have it, this one is the one that's going to hopefully give me a bit more of that depth and sheen that a holly leaf would have. And it gets lighter up here. So again, this dark area is pretty much confined to the tip And then it gets lighter in here. I'm just dusting over it with just kind of blend this in a little bit so it looks a little more uniform. It comes down here. So you can start to see the shadow building. To do the berry, I would do the same thing. I would take my lightest red and give everything a tone, and then take the deeper red and go in where I see the shadows. So again, I'm not coloring everything to the same degree of intensity. If you want to work in reverse and do your shadows first, that's fine too. So here I'm drawing in my shadow, and then I'm just going in with my lighter red where I see the highlight. So you can pick which way to go. I'm going to finish this and I'll be right back so we can move on to the last quadrant. I finished this one. So it's time to do our final one down here where we're going to reverse out the colors just for fun. But you don't have to do that. Again, any 4 ways you want to group your drawing is fine. So I am going to turn my red holly berries into green. And I'm going to then shade my green leaves red, just to keep a total opposite. This might wind up looking more like a poinsettia, but that's okay too. And that might be an interesting thing to try. The leaves on a poinsettia plant are really fun, and the petals are just stunning and rich in color. So if you happen to have a live or a silk version of a poinsettia, and you want to keep this in a holiday kind of theme, that might be the way to go too. There's so many options that you can do. And again, it doesn't have to be a plant or anything like that. We can do animals, whatever we want to do. Now, since this is red and I want to go lighter, I am now going to go back around and kind of erase out some of my graphite drawings. It worked better with the green, but it could start to get a little muddy with the red. I'm not going to worry too much about all of it, but I'm just trying to lighten it up so that now I can go back in and get my holly spikes without having the graphite mess in, because that graphite can start to take over. And then I'm just looking at the leaf, just like the last time. I'm going to do one, and I'm going to keep my leaf vein a little bit lighter when I do the red, and I'm going in just to shade. So I do have different reds, and that was my lighter one. This one is my darkest red that I have. It's called like a Tuscan red, and it's almost a brownish red, but it does a really nice job of getting shadows in. So where it's really dark, I can go over this. And you might be saying, well, that's great, but I don't have Tuscan red. I just have plain old red. Well, if you have plain old red and plain old green, guess what? Works just the same. I'll show you. So here's red. And I'm like, well, I want that darker. Take your regular green, go over it, and then the key is to go back over it again with the red. So there's a little more time involved, but you'll wind up getting a really nice rich red, and they look almost the same. So you don't have to have a lot of pencils, you just have to know how to blend your colors. Red and green are complements, so either using one or the other will help shade the other one that you're trying to use. So if I want to shade red, I'll go over it with a green and then back with red. If I want to shade green, I'll do green, go over it with red, and then cover the red up again with green so that it really blends nicely. So here's my green berry. Where I want shadow, I'm going to take a little bit of the red, and then I'm going to go over all of this with the green. And you can see it starts to create a nice shadow of green down here, but I used red. So don't be afraid to mix up your colors. I'm going to finish off these other 2 leaves and we'll see the final result. Well, we have our 4 individual drawings. So I'm going to take the tape off so you can see what this will look like. Now understand there's going to be a pencil line here because I wanted to create separate formats. If you color all of your backgrounds in, you could have some really cool, fun colors, but I decided not to do that because I just didn't want it to be overwhelming, and I could certainly do that. I could color greens here, reds here. This is white, so I guess that one would have to stand alone. But as we take the tape off, we should have a nice clean format edge. There we go. And coming this way, down here. The idea is to go gentle with the tape and try to pull from the direction that you taped it down so that it doesn't totally destroy your paper. I might get a little bit of paper off on this one. This tape got a little stickier than I wanted at one point, but that's close enough. And there you have it. So here's my finished Warhol inspired drawing. I'll go this way. It's always nice if you hold it a different way so you can see it. And the idea is to take one object and draw it 4 different ways, or draw it the same way, but with 4 different colors schemes, 4 different mediums. Maybe you want to do one in marker. You could even do something where each background is textured a different way. Think Roy Lichtenstein and how he used to do dots behind everything, almost like it was a halftone, all of his comic drawings. The idea is yours. How you express it is yours. The intent is to have fun and just learn how to look at things from different viewpoints. If you recall, last week we were looking at how Leonardo da Vinci handled looking at one object many different ways, and I used that Boston Terrier sculpture, and we just filled up the page. So things overlapped. This is the same idea, but very opposite, almost a little more graphic design. And for those of you who like nice clean edges, this project's for you. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Anyone Can Draw, Paint, and Create. Until I see you next week, Vincent Hall, stay safe and be well.